Amer is a French horror thriller film that came out in 2009 that's written and directed by both Elaine Catet and Bruno Farzani. And this is a $50 Patreon request from Josh, or also known as lilsoto in the Discord chat. And this is the second time in a row that Josh has requested a film to me that is not only obscure, and I know for certain a lot of people have probably never heard of it, but it's a film that, again, I was not aware of its existence until he brought it up to me. All I knew about this film going into it was that it's essentially this giant tribute and homage to the giallo horror era, which, by the way, this is really embarrassing, especially for somebody who's doing a review of a film that's supposed to be paying homage to the giallo era. I've never seen a giallo horror film. So, if that's something that's kind of losing your interest right now in this review, feel free to go away and go about your business. I don't even blame you. But another thing that I heard about this film before going into it was that after Perry watched it, he called this film Carlos Core. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Carlos. And I was wondering why the hell he would call this film Carlos Core. And after watching the first 5 minutes or so, I was kind of confused as to why he would say that. But after, the entire first sequence was done, I was like, okay, I completely understand why he would say that, because this entire film is purely visually driven. This is a great example, in my opinion, of how to go about visual storytelling and having basically zero dialogue. I'm talking there's maybe 4 lines of dialogue in this whole film, maybe 5, but even that's reaching, at least from what I can remember. So this film relies a lot on visual storytelling and aesthetic direction. And y'all already know that I am a huge sucker for that, and is a huge reason as to why I really admired and enjoyed this film quite a bit. And to be honest, the first 30 minutes of this film, the entire first act sequence, basically, is pretty much perfect. Honestly, the first act of this film is 10 out of 10 material. Just from a visual storytelling standpoint, just from a suspense building standpoint, stylistically, it's really interesting. And again, I've never seen a giallo film, so I'm guessing that if I were to see, one of the better giallo films, I could expect a similar style in those films. But yeah, the entire first act of this film is what I love about cinema. Everything to how character information is being conveyed in terms of mood, atmosphere, and theme being expressed through lighting. The delicacy of the editing, sound design, and the camera work is just on a whole other level. And on top of all of that, the elements of horror that we get in the first 30 minutes are so well executed and so well presented. There's a scene that has to do with a dead body and a pocket watch that I thought built suspense incredibly well and horrified me in a way just because of how certain things were conveyed and presented to you. It's just a masterclass of aesthetic direction and visual storytelling, and that alone could have made an excellent short film. But I do have to say, as the film progresses after that point, I feel like it gets a bit weaker and weaker. Because the first act of the film, as I mentioned, I think is the best act of the film. The second act, which is the teenage adolescent stage, or I guess semi-adult stage. I don't know if the main character is 16, 17, or 18. It's kind of ambiguous. But that second act is great, but it's not nearly as interesting or as masterful as the first act. The second act, and as presented in the third act, as we come to learn, this film takes a more psychological and erotic angle to it, and it works for the most part, because I do think that the eroticism in this film is thematic in terms of it trying to express that her childhood experiences and the trauma that she may have experienced, and really just her upbringing in general, has kind of led her down this sexually repressed path. In that regard, I think it's really effective. And again, even in the second act, even though I don't think it's as masterful as the first one, you do get, it just keeps up with all these aesthetic sequences where a lot of the emotion, all the character information, and all of the thematic conveyances are being expressed visually, whether it's through the editing, through the sound design, through the camera work. It's all being delicately crafted in a way to emphasize and express everything in this kind of dramatic way that can get the audience to understand the gravity of what's actually happening. There's a scene where two characters are running after a soccer ball, and I thought that scene was really interesting in terms of, again, how it's all visually put together and edited together. It just really sucks you in into every single moment, and found it really engaging and obviously stylistic. And then you also have another scene where the main character is walking in front of a group of bikers, and again, it's through the editing and through the camera work and through the sound design to where you get these heavily emphasized moments that are really engaging. And again, the film never stops this approach. It never lets up. Pretty much every single scene in this film has a stylistic attitude, and again, has a huge reliance on aesthetic direction to emphasize these moments. It's just, unfortunately, when we get into the third act of this film, even though it does have plenty of sequences that, again, are just really interestingly captured because of how creative they are with the aesthetic work and just the direction in general, the screenplay, to me, I just found to be really weak, and it never really builds up to anything that's really all that clever. It just made it to where I really wasn't invested that much into the character or even in the story anymore. And especially once the final conclusion is revealed, again, it's really not all that interesting. It's not refreshing, and it kind of takes a cliche route that you would see any thriller take. And that's really unfortunate because, again, the delicacy of this film in terms of how pretty much every single scene had so much creative effort and intention behind it, just made it incredibly admirable and an enjoyable experience. But again, it just leads up to a disappointing third act that, even though you enjoyed the experience, you do kind of feel a little gypped. And it's definitely possible that I'm just missing the whole tribute and homage element to giallo films, that I just wasn't able to appreciate the route it went because I'm just, I'm the one left out of the circle here. But just as somebody who, is just experiencing this film for what it is, I just thought it was kind of lackluster, unfortunately. There are a few of dialogue-less moments, ones that particularly have to do where they go out into society where they're interacting with people, and even in those situations, nobody's talking, and it just feels a bit unnatural. And I know that can be maybe hypocritical of me to say that because I love Refn films, and there's plenty of moments where people would argue that it's completely unnatural for characters to take long pauses as they do. And I think that's a valid argument, but I think Refn encapsulates the atmosphere so incredibly well to where most of the time it just really doesn't take you out, and it's not that noticeable. And also, I feel like in most Refn films, he has dialogue right where it needs to be. But even with those flaws, I still really enjoyed this film, and I admire its craft so damn much. And honestly, anybody who is trying to learn how to capture a cinematic language through aesthetic direction and visual storytelling, I think this is one of the many films you should go to try and pick that art form up, because this film does it incredibly well and is a gigantic reason as to why I found this film really enjoyable. So I'm going to give Amer a soft 7 out of 10. Yeah, I'd obviously still implore everybody to check this film out. Obviously, it's an obscure film. Josh back at it again. But if you really enjoy what I had to say about the film, just give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.